I did not forget.
Got it.
Well, I guess we're gonna be doing prayers in a minute. So.
Yep. Donna, your nose is looking better.
Yeah, I go back in a couple of weeks. The dairy strips all fell off,
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Make sure you use Vaseline.
Yeah, I know.
Seems to be a very popular procedure around.
I know.
Vaseline company loves it.
All right, let us go ahead and begin with the blessing, and then if anyone wants to join in after, we can include them. So together, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu otav v'tzivanu mazot divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments, commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Amen. Okay, today we are talking about the Sabbath is for celebration, for rest, not work. And I've got several questions for everybody. Why is Shabbat observed on the first Friday night and Saturday, or the first Friday night and then into Saturday? Why is it observed on those days and not necessarily Sunday or Monday or any other day? Marsha.
Well, does it go back to creation? God
Yes, it goes back to creation.
Right.
He rested.
Yes. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what she said.
So it goes back to the story of creation and that God rested on the seventh day.
Yeah, but how did he determine that was a Saturday rather than, say, Thursday?
Well, do we not count for, I don't know, we're counting on the Gregorian calendar, I suppose, but I don't understand what. No, you're right. I don't know why it's a Saturday.
Nan, any
I have no idea.
No? Pam?
Well, I've never understood what the first day was.
That's
How we got a first day.
Exactly.
That's what he's saying. Yeah.
Evelyn, we're talking about why we celebrate or observe Shabbat
Right.
on Friday night and Saturday, as opposed to maybe, well, as the Christians observe it on Sunday. Why Friday night and Saturday?
I can't think exactly the scripture, but there is a scripture, I believe, in Genesis, when in the creation, that that Sunday was the first day of the week.
Okay.
Therefore, Saturday was the last day of the week.
But that didn't happen till the Gregorian calendar, and the days are named actually for Greek gods and such. So.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So,
but it's there. It's there, and
I thought it says on the first day, right?
Pardon me?
It says on the first day God created.
The first day, but we don't know what the first day was.
Right.
I mean, if you want to go back millions and millions of years ago and ask him, you could. I guess you could, but
he's not going to.
That would work.
See, I don't mind the fact they started an arbitrary first day. They had to pick a spot.
True.
The first day.
True.
And they, and then they go from there. So.
Yeah, but it starts the night before. It starts at sunset and goes to sunset the night before.
Right. So it's observed by the lunar calendar rather than the solar calendar.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So, but it still doesn't define what day, why they chose those days as opposed to other days. Question for the rabbi.
Well, when did they first start defining these days? I mean, it's like in the Bible it says on the seventh day thou shalt rest.
Yeah.
So when did they start noting?
Well, apparently they had to develop a calendar because they had observances of three major pilgrimage festivals.
Right.
So they had to know, and I mean, again, it was the moon rather than the sun that,
Well, there is a lunar don't they, the Jewish calendar?
yes,
Lunar
yes,
calendar, yes.
yes, yes. And then, of course, who named the calendar months in the Jewish calendar as opposed to the others? But anyway, good question for the rabbi.
Well, night was first. Night was
Night was
first
first,
celebrated,
yes.
and then day, and then the day was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Friday night is Shabbos, and
Okay.
Saturday is the day.
That's
Got it.
because the scripture says, and the evening and the morning of the first day.
First day.
Evening and the morning.
So it all starts on the evening
Right.
It's an error.
rather than the day. Okay. Next question.
Robin?
Hang on.
Yeah.
I gotta mute you, Donna. Okay. How does the Sabbath observance continue to benefit the Jews? Pam.
Because it reminds us every week what we're involved in. And,
Okay.
and that we keep going. And every week we remember the Sabbath.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean in the question.
How does the Sabbath observance continue to benefit the Jews?
Well, in a sense, the fact that we are requested to have a day of rest, which in a sense is a renewal, rejuvenation of the body and the mind. And so it benefits us every week, in a sense, by having this one day that is not devoted to labor. Now, when it was written, labor meant physical labor, forced
right.
labor, whereas now labor is work, and in most cases in today's society, it is labor of the mind as opposed to labor of the body.
Body,
Even the mind needs a respite, in a sense, and a change. And so if you're sitting at your computer all week long, what you want to do on your day off is not sit at the computer, but to do something else, possibly physically, as opposed to what it was originally intended. Before, it was physical, and a day of rest was to give the mind a little stimulation. Now it is the reverse, as far as I'm concerned. And so we use our mind during the week and then use our bodies and go jogging on the weekend.
Got it. Well, also too, I think it's also the central idea of Judaism. Richard, I think what we're talking about here is how does the Sabbath observance continue to benefit the Jews? And according to one article, it states that it is the central idea of Judaism. Anyone agree or disagree?
Yes,
Yes.
I do.
Okay, you agree?
I
Yeah.
agree. And I think also it separates or sets us apart from other religions because people who might know would know that the Jews observe the Sabbath on Saturday.
Got it. Dan?
No, I agree with Binya.
Okay. Richard?
We're special.
Well, there are a number of Jews who are Jews and practice Judaism and never go to temple.
True.
So is it absolutely essential for us to have a temple to practice our religion? I think what it is a form of community of like minds. And that's what I see. Because, my daughter never goes to temple. She doesn't practice, but she says, I'm Jewish.
But
Okay.
does she observe the Sabbath separately?
Nope. She does. She'll do Passover a little bit with some matzah and make some kneaded soup, and she'll light the candles on Hanukkah, but that's it.
Huh.
She's
But how, but
Catholic, and he refuses to go to church. His mother dragged he and his two sisters to church almost every morning before school, early in the morning. They hated it, and as soon as they were old enough, they rejected it completely. So,
but how is that, but how is that relating to what Steve is asking? He says,
well, the thing is the Sabbath and is going to temple paramount to say that you're Jewish. I think that was the thesis, and that's the thesis here too. If you're not Jewish if you don't celebrate the Sabbath.
but
Marcia,
Well, okay.
hang on, Evelyn. Hang on.
wait, Evelyn, but the Sabbath is more of a thou shalt not work. Okay,
Right.
it's not about going to temple, it's about the working. Is
Well,
that,
it's about the
Steve,
work.
is that the prime thing that's going on, is the work thing?
Right,
I
right.
think
It's
at the
not just
time it
work,
was written.
it's
it
about
was written-
studying Torah. They're very religious, spend
Good
that
point.
studying Torah, so they're actually working.
Good
They're
point.
working, studying Torah.
Evelyn,
Call it work. They
Well,
call it.
I sometimes I wonder, are we Jews because we wish to be Jews, or are we Jews because society has, the outside society, the non-Jewish society, which is always the majority, has labeled us as Jews, and therefore we feel as if we have to be Jewish. And there's that dichotomy. There are those who wish to be Jews and observe Judaism in its tenets in whatever way they choose. We have that option in this country. We have that liberalization to take what's a sampling of whatever Judaism we want, whereas society still labels us as Jews, whether we want to be or not. So it's up to us to decide how we want to do it.
right. Donna, you're muted. You have to unmute, hon.
Trying.
Got it? There you go.
Okay. Well, you can be religious Jews, or you can be genetic Jews, or you can be both. If you're a genetic Jew, there's no question. Many people have had their genetic testing done to see if whatever they are for different reasons. And if you have the genetic Jewish genes, you can say to somebody, I'm not Jewish, but you are Jewish, because there's no question you have the genetic genes. There are people who have converted to Judaism from being a Gentile to Judaism, and they say, I'm Jewish. I have a problem with that, and they can be religious Jews and believe in the religion of Judaism, and they don't have to be genetic Jews to do that. So as Evelyn says, maybe you want to take your pick. I don't know there. But if you have the genetic genes, you're Jewish. If you don't have them, you're not Jewish, as far as that's concerned.
Okay. Marcia?
I think we're off the topic. We were talking about Sabbath.
Right, right. Well, it kind of ties in with Sabbath because the Sabbath is a central theme of Judaism, at least in my standpoint. But it's also, like Marcia said earlier, freedom of the mind. And Evelyn said the same thing, freedom of the mind, liberation, away from work, the toil, working in the soil, working, in the fields, cooking, stuff like that. Evelyn, yes, ma'am.
Once the second temple was destroyed and people were dispersed throughout the world, there was no temple to go to.
Right.
People worshipped and observed their Judaism in their own homes, maybe in a community center later on, but initially it had to be in their own homes, and they observed the Sabbath in their own homes. And so it had nothing really to do with temple per se until the Jews became better organized and were permitted to have their own small temple per se. So Judaism persisted not through the temple, but through the home and those family units that continued to observe it. So the Sabbath was really the most important critical part of Judaism, not the temple, but the observance of the Sabbath as such.
Right. Anyone else? Marcia?
I think the agrarian uh, society that was around, in the early days of Judaism,
Mhm.
it was hard labor. Whether you were working from the home, if you were working the fields, whatever you would, a smithy, whatever you were doing, it was hard. And so I think the use of the Sabbath gave people a break, and also a way to just sit and initially it was very formalized, very strict, what you could and couldn't do, gave you a time to think about being Jew, and as you said, Richard, this time to study, the Torah or whatever, that you couldn't do anything else. There wasn't any TV, you're not even allowed to do TV, but there wasn't any other recreational pursuits, so to speak, at that point. I don't think
Right,
they
right.
didn't have running classes or tennis or this or that, So
And
at that point,
you couldn't even light a fire,
right. And you couldn't
you know, or
even
turn
switch.
on a
If you
light.
got to that point with there were switches, he couldn't even do that. But
Right.
anyway, it gave you a time to reflect, and I think that made a big difference at the initiation of religion at that point, or our religion at that point.
Okay. Anyone else before we start to read? Richard?
I have something to say about Donna's remark about you're not Jewish if you don't have the Jewish gene, if you weren't born Jewish. She's right and she's wrong. I don't think in the Jewish, in the Torah, we see, or even well, I don't know about the Talmud, I can't tell, but in the Torah, there's nothing that says you can't be Jewish if you aren't born into a Jewish home. I think you can be circumcised and if you're a male, and you can convert to Judaism, and you can be just as good a Jew, if not a better Jew, than those who were born. Now, in the same breath, I have to agree with Donna about a Jewish gene, because if you look at the genetic things that we have now, they can trace your ancestry back thousands of years. And because Jews have intermarried, we very rarely, before the advent of enlightenment and the ability of Jews to be within regular society, we were cast as individuals who could only marry Jews. And that's what happened. And we developed things like Niemann-Pick's disease because of marriage. So
Interesting.
Donna's right and Donna's wrong. Congratulations.
See, Hatsy.
Okay, Evelyn and then Marcia.
And
Evelyn?
Oh, okay. Yes, it's only recently that they have discovered the DNA and all of the genomes that denote specific types, such as a Kohen. I mean, anyone who claims to be a Kohen, they actually do have a part of their DNA that can be traced way, way back. I'm thinking, what about those Jews who did convert many, many generations ago, and so are no longer considered Jews? And even though their DNA says, yes, at some point your ancestor was a Jew, they themselves don't consider themselves Jewish. They may have converted to another religion. And so are we right to designate them as a Jew as such? It doesn't seem right in today's current values as such.
So let's talk about the Sabbath and the celebration. We're on page 88. Parrot, Olive, who would like to read?
Okay, I'll start.
I just need one volunteer right now. Okay, Evelyn, go ahead.
Who's starting?
I'll
You.
let you start, Evelyn.
Okay, the Sabbath is for celebration for rest, not work. The commandment to celebrate the Sabbath is mentioned several times in the Torah. We are told that after laboring for 6 days to create the heavens and earth, God rested on the seventh day and called it Shabbat, day of rest. The 10 Commandments include the directive, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, along with the statement, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. Once again, the commandment is repeated at the beginning of the Torah portion via Moses calls the people together in order to speak with them about building the sanctuary. He is about to ask them for donations of gold, silver, and copper, and for their time and talents in the construction of their holy place. First, however, he reminds them that they are to work for 6 days and then observe a day of complete rest. Nothing is to supersede celebrating the Sabbath, neither their work nor the construction of the sanctuary. Working on the Sabbath carries a harsh penalty. Moses warns them that whoever does any work on it shall be put to death.
Okay, stop. Why such a harsh penalty? Why death? Anyone?
I think that's a good question because I think it's too harsh of a penalty.
But that was the only way to make them conform. If they were any more lax, they would not have observed it, and so it would have gone by the wayside. The way to make people conform is to punish them so severely that they will get into the habit of conforming.
But there might have been a personal circumstance that made them have to work that particular time because of
True.
something.
Depends on how lenient the judges were, how lenient the society was. But if they were very strict about it, then you were out of luck.
But it's also considered, the Sabbath is to be observed seriously, right? Okay, so, and it's a holy day. God created it as a holy day. Nan?
Well, and according, I mean, Rabbi Kaplan has said many times that Shabbat is the holiest of holies, and that we celebrate it every week, whereas Yom Kippur is only celebrated one day a year. And I think this was a way of emphasizing the fact that this is truly the holiest day in our calendar, and we celebrate it every year, and therefore we should take it seriously to rest and reflect. And granted, work now is different, as several people have said, but it still holds true that if you really want to understand Shabbat and feel the connection, you need to take a rest. I mean, some people, while they don't observe the Shabbat the way, without fire or light or whatever, but there are some people that will not use their computer for 24 hours, or they will not shop in a store for those 24 hours. I mean, we're lucky. Stores are open 7 days a week for the most part. You don't, even if you work a Monday through Friday job, you generally can fit in a Sunday to go do your grocery shopping and not do it on Saturday. So I just think it's,
and this too.
right.
Phone,
Well,
yeah.
that's, using a computer, and that goes for any, whether it's your cell phone or whatever. But, and I've tried to say, well, I'm not going to do, like use my computer or whatever. Unfortunately, if a cell phone is your only telephone number and somebody is trying to get a hold of you, you know, you have to be able to take the call. You may not go searching or playing games on your phone or something like that, but you know, you using it as a phone and not a computer. So
Got it. Donna and then Evelyn.
In Israel, there are in the Orthodox area, there will be signs up on the street if this is a Orthodox area that says no driving on Shabbat, and people honor that. I lived in an Orthodox section in Tiberias. Even the kids did not go out to play until later part or they stopped on Shabbat, on the Saturday of Shabbat. They did not go out to play until the evening was coming on. And I was always amazed because when the windows were open and things, I very rarely heard a child cry. It was really quite amazing. And for like if it was an emergency vehicle, police, ambulance or such, they did not run their sirens unless it was absolutely necessary of where they were driving.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
Evelyn.
Before World War II, the Jewish section, the Lower East Side of New York City, et cetera, the Jewish shopkeepers would close on Saturday. And there were blue laws when I was living in Connecticut where every store was shut on Sunday because it was essentially a Christian society. The only store that was permitted to be open was the pharmacy, or if it was a traditional drugstore, the pharmaceutical could be open, but the rest of it, the cosmetics and the toiletries, were not permitted to be sold. During the war, things changed, obviously. Society was turned on its end. And after the war, it became much more secular, and there were pressures with the growth in the 50s to keep the stores open, to encourage business. And so you began to have stores being opened on the Sabbath. This was true of even the Jewish shopkeepers, except for the ultra-Orthodox, who closed on Saturday. And so you had a degradation, in effect, of the strictures that were required of someone who was a Jewish observant as such. And society today is turned on its end as far as I'm concerned. It is the most secular, probably, culture that has ever existed, and religion is irrelevant in the eyes of not only Jews but Christians as well. There are many who simply don't bother going to church. So you have to look at this scripture written in X number of thousands of years ago, according to the society that existed then, and look at today's society and say, we as Jews should observe the Sabbath, and yet there are things that, as Nan pointed out, that will be very, very difficult to survive. If someone is having a stroke and you can't answer the telephone or use the telephone, you are creating a death sentence for that individual. And what are our values? Do we feel that way?
Exactly. Marcia.
I wonder if in Europe they have what we used to call blue laws. I wonder if this church is, a very religious, like Spain or other countries that are very, mostly Catholic. I wonder if the stores are closed on Sunday. I don't know. Has anybody been?
Good question. I honestly don't know either.
Donna may know.
Donna might know. Donna?
I do know we lived there, compliments of the U.S. Air Force in Germany. And at that time, I can't say what it is today, but at that time, stores were closed.
But they were in the United States then too. The stores used to be closed on Sunday. That's what.
Right. Well, after in the 50s.
There, and where we lived in Germany, they were closed until 1 o'clock. and generally by 1 o'clock, churches were over.
Well, even when I lived in California, and it wasn't that long ago, it was in the 90s. When I first moved there, this store, like a mall, did not open until 11 or 12 or something like that.
Mhm.
But then it's a few years into that, I moved there in 1990. After a while, they did change the laws, so everything was open every day, you know. They were open Thanksgiving, Black Friday or something.
Right,
I
right.
liked it so much that weekend that they started opening. But I just wonder if it was a general thing in Europe that they close on Sundays. I kind of think they may. I don't know. I guess I could Google it or something. I don't know.
Anyone else before we continue to read?
Hmm.
Okay, Evelyn, continue.
The last, next to the last paragraph on
Yes.
48 on the
This
left.
side.
Several centuries after Moses, the prophet Isaiah calls the Sabbath a delight. Rabbi Hiya ben Abba, who taught in the 3rd century, his followers that the Sabbath is a day given only for pleasure. Most students of Jewish tradition agree with the evaluation of Rabbi Leo Beck that there is no Judaism without the. Yet, if the Sabbath is meant to be such a delight and pleasure and of such importance to the Jewish people, why does the Torah specifically forbid work? Furthermore, how does Jewish tradition define work? Might there not be certain activities that what one person calls work and another calls pleasure? The Torah repeats the commandment not to work on the Sabbath 12 times and specifically forbids making a fire, baking and cooking, gathering wood, moving from one boundary to another, plowing and harvesting, carrying objects, engaging in business, and buying and selling. Despite the mention of such activities forbidden on the Sabbath, the Torah contains no definition of work. It is the early rabbis who created such a definition. They identify 39 different categories of work from their study of our Torah portion and its description of the construction of the sanctuary. Since the people were forbidden to work on the Sabbath, it was assumed by the rabbis that every kind of labor associated with building the sanctuary or supporting the builders was prohibited.
Stop, 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 stop.
Okay.
Nan?
All right. Okay, so my question is, what about doctors? Some, which is a profession that has to do with life-saving powers. Would a doctor, like Evelyn had said, the pharmacies were allowed to be open because, if you need a prescription, you have to be able to access. Did the rabbis at one time, did they allow doctors or, the medical personnel to be excused from this?
Good question.
Good question.
I mean, because Moses
So
said,
we have a
if you
doctor over
work,
there.
if you work, you're going to be put to death. Now,
Right.
is Moses going to put to death the people? Their medical practices and things were different then, but would he put to death a healer or, the person? I would think he wouldn't. I mean, I think he's preaching to the general populace.
Okay. Richard, you're a doctor.
Well, the guy was that we were always allowed to do stuff. Now, normally, even today in modern medicine, Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, and any national holiday, we could not do elective surgeries.
Right, elective.
Elective surgery, in other words,
Got
a
it.
surgery that's planned. An appendectomy comes in, a patient needs acute bowel problem or has obstruction of the airway. That's a different story. You could do that any time of day or night. A peritonsil abscess in a kid, anytime. So emergencies you can do, regular stuff you can't, and I'm looking up now on the internet, because it's not Saturday.
Okay,
Are doctors allowed to practice on Sabbath, Sabbath, in Israel? And that'll be the real, let's see what they have to say.
Huh.
If it involves preservation of life, then yes. The mitzvah trumps all of the others, including the keeping of Sabbath. That's why doctor, firefighters can work on the Sabbath. Okay, so emergency things can be done on the Sabbath. Routine stuff cannot. You cannot see a patient, for instance, on a Saturday on Friday night in Israel unless it's an emergency.
okay.
So
Okay,
emergency
Donna, hang on.
life things trump it all.
got it. Donna, Minya, and Nan.
As a nurse, I have worked where in a group of doctors, they respect each other, generally speaking. And a non-Jewish will take call, say on the Sabbath or the Saturday, and where the Jewish doctor will cover them on Sunday, which non-Jewish doctors like to have off. In Israel, it's the same thing, except the non-Orthodox or religious Jews will cover on a Saturday, and the religious Jews will not work on a Saturday or on Shabbat. So
Okay.
they work it out generally very cooperatively.
Minya,
My sister-in-law lives in Spring Valley, New York, and it's right next to Muncie, which is a really religious area. They have things worked out with the police department that you don't call their house at all if there's an emergency. You call the local police and they will come to your house with a message, so you never have to pick up the phone.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next? Nan?
Well, I was going to say that is why when October 7th happened, Hamas chose that day. First of all, it was a holiday, and secondly, it was Shabbat.
Was
But
it?
that is why all the doctors and emergency people went out, and the Orthodox in the country supported it because it was an emergency and there were lives that were at stake.
I didn't realize it was Sabbath, but this October 7th was a Sabbath.
Yeah.
Well,
It was Yom
I'm
Kippur.
going to look. I believe it
I'm pretty
was. I
sure
will
you're
just.
right. I think you're correct.
I
There was
just
a festival, but then they also had, they invaded that,
October 7th
Kibbutz.
was a Saturday.
okay,
It was a Saturday because Simchas Torah was
right,
the
right.
night
And that's
before.
why they
was
were
the-
celebrating.
Yeah, they were at the music fair, etc.
Exactly.
Right, but it was Shabbat, and Simchas Torah is a celebratory holiday, no matter when it falls on. So
Right.
the people are going to celebrate and party, and especially since Israel has so many of the young secular Jews, they wouldn't be true Shabbat observers for the most part.
Was that so that Saturday, that it was Saturday and Simchas Torah? Is that what you
Well,
said?
Simchas Torah was Friday.
Friday night,
Right, the day before, you're saying.
right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because they attacked people leaving that music festival.
Not leaving, they were actually at the festival. when
At it, but I thought they were at their cars or something.
Some people were. I mean, because the festival had already been going on for hours,
Yeah.
and there were some people because maybe they needed to get back to where they were from in order for work on Sunday.
No, but you're saying it. But I'm saying, was it Friday night that this happened or Saturday? That the whole
It
thing
was
happened on
Saturday.
Saturday, I think.
I think it was a Saturday.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have something about wars on the Sabbath. You cannot start a war on a Sabbath unless obligatory, you need to do it. And it says operational duties, fighting a war are generally permitted to do on a Sabbath. There's even a military rabbinate with an advisory role regarding Sabbath observances.
That 6-day war, I think there was a Sabbath involved in it, at some point. That was a
Right,
thing of
right.
contention at the time.
I just remember, I'm trying to think, I don't know if it's in the Bible, but a group of Jews refused to fight the Syrians or somebody on the Sabbath. And they were all, I think it was during the time of David maybe, and they were all massacred.
Huh.
Does anybody remember that one?
No,
I remember reading about it.
Mhm.
you may be right, I don't know.
Huh.
Well, call up the rabbi, will you? Is
Well,
he in Jamaica? Where is he now? In Jamaica, Europe?
no, he's not in Europe. I think he's either in Central America or in an island somewhere. I'm not sure.
Well, time difference isn't great. We could call him up. I'll let you do that, Steve.
Thanks,
I'll
thanks.
stay out of it.
Okay. Shall we continue to read then?
Okay.
What page are we on?
The middle of 88 on the right column.
So say that again. What page number?
88,
88.
88, right column.
Rabbi Judah.
Okay, got it.
Let's see.
Rabbi Judah Hanasi, editor of Mishnah, provides us with the 39 categories. They include sowing, SOWING,
Uh-huh.
sheathing, threshing, winnowing, cleansing crops, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking, shearing, blanching, cutting, dyeing, spinning, weaving, making a minimum of 2 loops, weaving 2 threads, separating 2 threads, tying, untying, sewing a minimum of 2 stitches, ripped out stitches in order to replace them, hunting a gazelle, slaughtering it, flaying it, salting it, curing, scraping its hide, slicing its hide, writing a minimum of 2 characters, erasing in order to write them, building, wrecking, extinguishing, kindling, hammering, transporting. I'd like to stop right there and say, essentially, they're telling you to sit there like a vegetable all day on Shabbat and do nothing but read the Torah. And I'm surprised they let you read, to be perfectly honest, with all of these strictures. So this is a point of utter ridiculousness. As anyone can see,
Second.
Like Pam has a comment.
Evelyn, hold on just a second. Let's go with Pam and then Nan.
Hold it.
You're on. Got it. There you go.
Okay, I'm still wondering about how the gazelle got into this list.
I think that means animals. in general.
Animals, any kind of hunting. And they
It
use
doesn't say that.
gazelle- they use the
If
gazelle
it
as-
said any type of hunting, I would be not surprised. But hunting a gazelle in the middle of this list,
yeah,
there's
Yeah.
there's
I
another
know,
story
it's
there.
It's odd. It's
I
very.
gotta ask the rabbi about. There gotta be more to that story.
Okay, Nan, go ahead.
I see this as a clear way of giving the women who ran the house and were in charge of doing all the things for their children, giving them a day of rest, because the men, while many of them helped procure the food and stuff, many of them were sitting and studying Torah and not doing the physical labor, where the women at this time were very physically involved in keeping the house and doing all of this. So the woman, the day before Shabbat, she got her meals ready. She had all the bread she would need. And then, she would get a day off and be able to sit and maybe play with, entertain the kids or do something that was not considered work, but give her time to have a break as well, because most people, today think, well, for many years, up until the 60s, when there were not as many in the workforce, today it's very different. But men were the breadwinners. And so a lot of people said, oh, if you're stay-at-home mom, you have it easy. And well, it wasn't, even in our society, it wasn't that easy. So this would be a way of giving them a timeout
Oh,
and permission not to
Gina
do
and then
anything.
Richard.
I wonder when the Shabbos Goy came into effect. Because then women or men, neither of them would have to do any work, because you had this person who did not have to observe Shabbat. They could do the chores that you needed done that day.
Mhm. Richard and then Evelyn.
just as a side of that, General Colin Powell, do you remember him?
Right.
Mhm.
He was the commander in chief of the armed forces during the Iraqi, I think, first
Right.
war. And he remembers very fondly being a Shabbos boy. He used to mention that. And I just thought I read about Rabbi Judah Hanasai. He was born in 135 AD and died in 215 AD. So he lived about 83 years of age, which is very old for that time.
Time.
And there was no Jews in Israel. And he's the one who, of course, was the main instigator for putting the Mishnah together. So he was a big macher in those days.
I think Evelyn was next.
My one comment about the women having off on Shabbat. I remember speaking to a rabbi many years ago, and he bragged about how his wife would get ready for Shabbat so that they could have a wonderful Saturday together. This woman practically killed herself between baking the challah and getting everything ready and making sure that there was food, the cholent in the, or cholent as they call it, in the oven that was already pre-lit. The poor woman was near exhaustion by the time Shabbat came around. She certainly needed Shabbat because the husband was practically killing her before she could get ready. So, yeah, that was a mixed bag as far as I was concerned.
Well, if you can remember the movie or the play, The Fiddler on the Roof, and the wife was getting things together for Shabbat, and everything was in a rush, and then Tevia's just just slowly moving along and not having a care in the world other than his cow and his wagon and his milk.
Yeah.
So interesting. I thought it was funny to watch them trying to get everything together for Shabbat, and then he just comes along. Anyway, anyone else have any comments before we continue to read? Okay, she's all yours.
As one can see, Jewish tradition took seriously the prohibition of any labor on the Sabbath. Why? Why set aside the Sabbath as a day of no work? Several answers are suggested. One suggestion is found within an imaginative dialogue invented by the rabbis between God and the Torah. The rabbis say that after God created the heavens and earth and placed the people of Israel in their land, the Torah came to God with a complaint. "Oh God," said the Torah, "what will become of me when the Israelites are busy every day of the week with their occupations?" God answered, "I'm giving them the Sabbath, and they will devote themselves on that day of rest to studying Torah." In other words, for the ancient rabbis, the Sabbath is meant as a time for reviewing and examining important lessons of Torah. Studying each week's Torah portion exposes a person to questions of history, ethical challenges, and to the varying perspectives of great thinkers on some of the most perplexing issues facing human beings. Sabbath Torah study provides food for thought, time-tested insights, and experiences meant to enrich our understanding of ourselves, others, and the world in which we live. One refrains from work on the Sabbath to benefit from the wisdom of Torah tradition.
Okay, stop. What do we, or how do you define Torah tradition? What does that mean?
Whatever the rabbis have decided as Torah tradition.
Richard?
Well, there's what, 613 commandments in the Torah?
Yes?
Maybe follow those ones which are still pertinent today. Obviously, animal slaughter is not.
Okay,
And the traditions of the temple aren't, because the temple doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, follow Rabbi Kaplan.
okay, but Rabbi Kaplan in our Sabbath or Shabbat service on Friday night, he likes to turn the lights off while
That's
they're
for
doing
effect, but
the
that's just
Sabbath candles. Say again?
that's just for effect, I think. to
I
make-
understand that, but
Oh,
they
that's
still
work.
turning
That's
on,
work.
switching on lights and turning them on and off. I don't know if that would, I mean,
That
obviously,
is, that would not be accepted under.
would not be
Orthodox.
considered in the Orthodox, but in the
Right.
Reformed tradition, it is.
Yeah,
Well, even driving to temple would not.
right.
Right.
Either driving with a horse or a cart, you have to walk, and walk's a lot more work than driving. But that's not considered work.
Right.
Anyone else have any comments?
I
Marcia?
don't think we can equate the Orthodox view of the Sabbath with the Reform. It's just not the same. A whole different world. I mean, if the Reform are celebrating the Sabbath, it's more of a not doing the job that you would do on Monday through Friday, let's say, okay? And not doing things that are, I mean, maybe not mowing the lawn, maybe doing something that's more recreational. I don't think it would cover anything of the sort of things that are expected. I mean, Orthodox people walk to temple on a Saturday because or a Friday night or Saturday. Generally, the services that they're going to are more likely to be for Saturday, I think.
Saturday, yeah.
And they because they're not going to use their cars. I mean, it's like think back to the Amish. It's almost closer to that vision, who are still celebrating a more orthodox, if you will, presentation of religion than most Christians are.
Yeah.
Marcia or Evelyn, go ahead.
The Jews who are Orthodox will live in an area that is 1 mile around the shul that they belong to, so that they are able to walk to it. They do not live 5 miles away from their house of worship. They make sure that it is within a reasonable area, it's called the Erev area, so that they can walk. And you'll find that in certain areas, there's a concentration of Orthodox because they want to live within walking distance of their synagogue. And that's why they tend to cluster the way they do.
Okay, Marcia, before you start, I know traditionally in a lot of the temples or synagogues that I've been a member of, if there is an event like a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, the sanctuary or the temple was not used until after, say, like 1 o'clock. And then that way you could start with, preparing the food and getting the table set and stuff like that. I'm even thinking like for Passover, when we start preparing for it, we don't do anything on Saturday morning, but we can, at least from the policies that I've observed, don't start it until after like noon, something like that. Anyone else have a comment or
Yeah.
observe that as well? Marcia?
think our congregation doesn't tend to have daytime events on on Saturday. They'll save it for Sunday. I don't think we do it on Saturday. Do you remember?
I'm
any?
pretty sure we don't. I'm pretty sure
No,
we don't.
no.
We have Saturday evening
Saturday
after
Havdalah,
Shabbat is over.
Havdalah. But that's different for if you have a major event,
Oh, the prepping.
yes.
Well,
Because to me, that's work.
oh, it is work,
Mhm.
but I guess you have to think about it as being a pleasure in a way that you're doing as a mitzvah for the temple to prepare for the event in the evening. I don't know. You can excuse anything in life, I suppose, if you work around it.
Especially in this day and age.
Yes.
Donna,
I've just noticed since I've been coming to the services, that many things are done, on Sunday, not on Shabbat.
right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, well, you can continue if you'd like.
Okay, Rabbi Mordechai M. Kaplan, however, suggests that the Sabbath is more than a time for Torah study. He calls it a pause in our brushwork of life and compares its importance to the critical rest moments of an artist. An artist, he observes, cannot be continually wielding his brush. He must stop at times in his painting to freshen his vision of the object, the meaning of which he wishes to express on his canvas. For Kaplan, the Sabbath is a time for pausing, to take a fresh look at what we are trying to do with our lives. It is a weekly opportunity to scrutinize our goals, hopes, successes, and failures. Getting away from work allows us a chance to assess its worth and the value of what we are doing with our energies and talents. After celebrating the Sabbath, we are ready, Kaplan says, to take ourselves to our painting with clarified vision and renewed energy. We are not machines. The Sabbath prevents us from reducing our life to the level of a machine. The gathered experience of humanity that the break in the routine of work, one day in seven, will heighten the value of the very work itself is not likely to be put aside. The Sabbath is one of the glories of our humanity.
Okay, stop. Any comments so far, and especially in the box?
Yeah, I think our minds and our bodies need a break. It's like trying to solve a problem and you just can't resolve it. And sometimes you walk away from it and think of something else, and lo and behold, eureka! And lo and behold, you've got the solution to it. So the mind continues to work in its own fashion, but without the pressure of finding an immediate solution to the problem, whatever it is you're coping with. So yes, obviously the human mind does need, and the body of course needs a break in one way or another.
Well, it's like with a computer, you need to reboot it every once in a while to regenerate it. So, Minya, do you have any comments so far?
Oh, I did it through a different app, but she can see you now.
I was thinking of a book I recently read that takes place in Williamsburg. It's called Leaving Eastern Parkway.
Okay.
It's about a family, an Orthodox family, and what happens to them. And one of the things that I read in there that I'd never heard of before was that they have to tear pieces of toilet paper, separate each one,
Oh, you're
and
kidding.
leave it in a pile near the
Heard of that, yeah.
Yeah.
near the toilet, I guess, because pulling the paper is work.
That, to me, that's a little too extreme. Pam, I hear you, I see you.
Yeah.
You're unmuted now. There you go.
Dave's Orthodox brother does exactly that.
Me too. Wow. The
Yes,
first I had ever heard of it.
yes.
Who does that, did you say?
Dave's Orthodox rabbi brother.
We've done a lot of reading in book club. I should have went, I'm sorry. That of Orthodox communities, and so many of these unusual habits show up in, or practices show up in those books that, I mean, there was the one that we read, because you alluded to it, Evelyn, and we talked about the medical, about this guy having was it this woman, it was the woman that was so sick in the Orthodox community in Brooklyn, and her husband didn't call the doctor. Oh, he finally came in and called the doctor. She wouldn't.
Huh.
She knew she was that ill, and she wouldn't call the doctor until he finally came home. And he was so super religious, but he saw how ill she was, got a hold of this. They have an ambulance there that will work on the Sabbath. And then it was like they had to do penance for having done it, having called. They were just so upset with themselves that they actually did call for help on Sabbath. I mean, it's crazy.
Huh.
And there comes a point where when the point is life and death, that you don't mess around, But there a lot of those habits came up with it, and it's such an eye opener that you can't imagine that people are living that way.
Evelyn, go ahead.
When a religion becomes so strict and perhaps distorted in its values that it no longer serves the community that it's supposed to, does it then have actual value to that community? You question the sanity of it. If it's detrimental to its adherents, what's the point? Maybe the rabbi needs to answer that.
Good. That would be a good question for him.
And who is making those laws up but man, and that, I mean, or woman, whatever. But I mean, it's made by the laws. The restrictions are set upon people on them by themselves, which is not necessarily appropriate,
Right.
If it harms the individual, then what good is the religion? It is meant to be something that draws people together, benefits not only the individual, but the community as a whole. And if all it does is destroy or doesn't help those people who need help, then these strictures obviously should be removed. They should not be accepted as part of what that community believes in.
Mhm.
That's my opinion. And whoever agrees, fine.
Of course. Anyone else? Shirley, you've been awfully quiet.
No.
Okay.
All right, let's continue.
Evelyn, continue.
Okay, top of page 89.
89.
Not working on the Sabbath, however, is not only connected with gaining a fresh perspective on life. Jewish tradition also celebrates the Sabbath as a day of liberation. Each Sabbath is welcomed with the singing of the Kiddush, the blessing over the wine, which makes reference to the Sabbath as a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. This connection of the Sabbath with the theme of freedom is also captured in the comments of modern psychologist and biblical commentator Eric Fromm. Fromm claims that it is no exaggeration to say that the spiritual and moral survival of the Jews during 2,000 years of and humiliation would hardly have been possible without the one day in the week when even the poorest and most wretched Jew was transformed into a man of dignity and pride. The power of the Sabbath, Fromm argues, is the expression of the central ideas of Judaism, the idea of freedom, the idea of complete harmony between humanity and nature. By not working, that is to say, By not participating in the process of natural and social change, man is free from the chains of time, although only for one day a week. For from the Sabbath celebrates the liberation of human beings from the chains of time. It frees us from the obligation of meeting a schedule, of producing by a certain hour in the day, of dealing with all the stress and pressures that derive from imposed and necessary timetables, agendas, and calendars. The Sabbath liberates us from slavery to the clock.
Okay, stop. Okay, if you think about it, when the unions were starting to evolve, and the harsh work that the employers demanded on the workers, and obviously that's why unions came about. But they were ruthless. They wanted them to work 7 days a week, and finally there were laws creating this 5 or 6 day week. And I think that the Sabbath has something to do with that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the labor laws that came in involving young children, where children
Yes.
very, very young were expected to work in the factories for ungodly number of hours, and they weren't fed, they weren't taken care of, they were just expected to work for 12, 14, 16 hours a day, which was inhumane. And so again, it took government, though, rather than religion, to enforce these laws. And so this is an instance where religion had really nothing to do with it. It was society as a whole that was abusing its people, and therefore there had to be regulations to protect those people as such.
Marcia?
But they could turn to the religious example to produce those days off for people. Can
Correct.
back to that and
Correct.
say, well, here the Bible says, so it did make a difference.
But even back in the 20s, early 1900s, or late 1900s, I should say, that life was totally different then.
So
And it was all about the invention of this, and the introduction of that, and so it was a constant push to make the economy even better and more efficient, and and then of course you have the bosses that wanted more and more and more. You can't do that.
well, it was I remember it being a youngster, it was in the 30s, and John Ellsworth was president of the United Mine Workers, and it was one strike after another. The economy was being ground to a halt because the miners were refusing to work under the conditions that the mine owners wanted them to. The beginning and the strengthening of the labor movement in the country, because again, the corporations that were forming were abusing the workers. They were being very unfair. The name of the game was to make as much money as possible,
Right.
pay the stockholders, and because of that, it was the workers who were at a disadvantage. And so this is how the labor unions became as powerful as they did. It took a long time for them, but eventually they did become a very powerful labor force, as they are today. There are certain unions today that are so outspoken and fund so much to political parties that personally I feel they have an outside influence. But hey, let's not get into politics.
Okay, yes, no, no politics in this,
But
this
but the
discussion.
Sabbath was an example, a given that they could turn to and say, this day is not up for grabs. You're not gonna take us on that day. We're going to, I mean, so there's still stores around that don't open until later in the day to allow people on Sunday to go to church. And there's still some stores that close on Sundays and totally, so.
Maybe in a small town, in a community,
No,
but
and even in our town here now, there are stores that don't open Sundays. Because I know this, I mean, even some of the chain stores,
Yeah, well,
there are some,
okay. Shall we continue?
yes.
not.
Bottom of the page 89, lower, right side,
Right, last paragraph.
right.
Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel agrees with Fromm. We have fallen victims, he comments, to the work of our hands. It is as if the forces we had conquered have conquered us. The Sabbath is the day on which we learn the act of surpassing civilization. On the Sabbath, we live as if we were independent of technical civilization. Not working on the Sabbath allows a person to enter what Heschel defines as a realm of time where the goal is not to have to be, not to have, but to be, not to own, but to give, not to control, but to share, not to subdue, but to be in accord. Resting on the Sabbath, using it as a day for prayer and study and for sharing friendships and the love of family is a way of ruling time rather than allowing time to rule us. By setting aside the Sabbath, argues Heschel, we seize control of the time of our lives. It becomes ours and we become liberated. Celebrating the Sabbath is a declaration of our freedom.
Continue.
I have
Go ahead, Mark.
comment. I think when so many of these edicts were written, families were intact, the families stayed together. We live in a transitory society today where mother and father are left in their homestead. The children are grown, living in working in various companies around the company. We have become not even the nuclear family anymore. We have become just splintered as such. And so the feeling of celebrating the Sabbath together. This is why we join a congregation and get together with other congregants, because they become our surrogate family, let's say.
Right.
And so that there's still that empty feeling of not having those few of us who have family nearby are very fortunate. Most of us do not. And therefore, the community center that we belong to becomes the way that we can survive in effect with mental sanity, shall we say, and belonging, because otherwise we become terribly isolated. So it is critical that we still continue to have a synagogue, temple, or something to which people can belong and congregate at.
Oh, no, I'm not interested, thank you.
Richard, any comment? No, okay. Donna? No. Pam? Okay, I'm going down the list. Minya?
Wait, I missed that one. What was, what,
Uh,
I had to get rid of the robocall. What was the question?
Well, we're talking about the fact that, for 6 days we shall work, compete, to struggle to shape the world to fit our needs, desires, expectations. Why is it so important? Why is it so important? Donna?
Well, back to why we so come to services, because we want to be with other people. We want to like people. I think we saw that during COVID when churches could not get together, when people could not get together. And I know I felt this, I felt isolated because I liked people. And I wanted to be with people, particularly when we were worshiping God. And so I think, the churches and synagogues back together again, we're so grateful for that. But I thought I think, at least for me, that showed me that I need to be with other people.
Okay. Anyone else? Marcia?
I think when you go to services, when you sit down and the services it's sort of a time of peace and reflection, and it's nice to be able to do it with others in a congregation. But I think the restrictions on a very religious Sabbath, I don't think are practical in our world today, and that's a difference than getting together for Sabbath and reflecting on our religion and the meaning of it and etc. But I think a lot of it is, I think that's why a lot of people join either conservative or reform, because it's just the restrictions of Orthodox are too heavy on especially on Sabbath limitations, so but that doesn't take away from the Friday night service situation or Saturday morning.
True. Okay, Evelyn, you want to continue?
Yeah,
Okay.
Pincus Pelli extends Heschel's views. What's the matter?
You okay?
Huh? Okay, I can continue. I thought I was interrupted.
No, go ahead.
All right, Pincus Pelli extends Heschel's views by pointing out that the purpose of the Sabbath is to remind us of what is really important in human life. For 6 days we work, we compete, we struggle to shape the world to fit our needs, desires, and expectations. Celebrating the Sabbath as a day of no work reminds us that the real purpose of life is not to conquer nature, but to conquer the self, not to fashion a city out of a forest, but to fashion a soul out of a human being, not to build bridges, but to build human kindness, not to learn to fly like a bird or swim like a fish, but to walk on the earth like a human being, not to erect skyscrapers, but to establish mercy and justice, not to manufacture an ingenious technical civilization, but to bend our will to God's will. Yet, not working on the Sabbath, Pelli points out, is a discipline. Celebrating the Sabbath is not a matter of occasionally rescuing oneself from exhaustion or of taking time off when it's convenient. In order for the Sabbath to make a difference, it must be set aside and welcomed each week. Rest must be scheduled, but rest must also be scheduled or created.
Stop. Okay, anyone have a comments in regards to God's will or man's will and taking time off for Shabbat?
Well, if you take a trip to the Caribbean and observe Shabbat on a beach, does that count as Sabbath?
I would say yes. If you've ever been on a cruise, they do typically have a service on Friday night.
Yeah.
And they do provide wine and challah. But I would say yes, if you're on a beach And you don't have to wear a talit or a kippah, but, at least if you're praying, then I think to me anyway, you would be observing Shabbat. Pam, you agree?
I agree. We've done a few cruises. Every cruise seems to have a rabbi, and every cruise has a little Friday night thing going for you. So yes, we definitely Shabbat can be part of it.
Yeah.
I have never seen a rabbi on a cruise who held a Shabbat thing. At one time, I was at a Passover thing, and a Catholic priest who was always assigned to the ships was passing out the the seders. That was interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I bet it
we've had
was.
rabbis on, there are some rabbis that do that as a side gig, so to speak, where they,
Yes.
Our rabbi, the previous one, used to go on cruises
Rabbi
and
Moss.
yeah, when he had vacation time, he'd take vacation on a cruise and act as the rabbi for that particular Friday night.
Probably got a discount on the cruise.
Yeah.
I,
It's not a discount, it's free.
Free, there you go. Even
Ah,
better.
so it's about this.
Yeah, Rabbi Weiner, who lives in Sun City Grand, I think, he has a congregation, I think once a month down over on the East Valley somewhere. But this is a constant, it was for constant with him on going on cruises all the time and acting as the rabbi. Passover is a big deal. I mean, when you get a Passover cruise, yeah.
are these cruises that have the rabbis and a Friday evening service, is it advertised that way in the ads for the cruise?
They don't advertise it, but you can inquire about it.
Inquire about it, and typically they will have a service. It's either lay led or rabbi led.
Yeah.
And at least my observance, and I've been only on 2 cruises, so.
I've been on several.
Anyone else in the comments?
I think it's what's really important probably to our generation or our kids' generation is the time out, that taking it sort of reminds you of your Judaism. It connects you again to it, and whether you don't, you observe it very with a lot of restrictions or a few of them, it's still there in your mind, and that's what's the important part of it. It's whether you hit every switch or not, or on or off. I think that's irrelevant. I mean, it gets to be obsessive after a while when on some of the things. But if you know that it's Sabbath, if you make concessions to it and you have it in your mind that it is your day of rest, I think that's important. I don't know how anybody else thinks.
Okay. All right, Evelyn, you want to continue? We're almost done.
Finish this. By uplifting the Sabbath as a special day of no work, Jews reserve time for achieving a fresh perspective on life, for studying the wisdom of Torah, and for celebrating their freedom. Observing the Sabbath each week heightens sensitivity to the essential questions and meanings of human existence.
Thank you, Evelyn. You did a great job.
Thank
Appreciate it very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
What is our next, what page do we start on next?
The next, hang on.
Would you like me to say that?
Yes.
Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, I'm leading on March 13th. And we're doing the accountability of public officials, pages 92 to 94.
Right.
And I'm getting ready, Steve.
You got it all covered, right?
Well, I'm working on it.
All right. All right. Well, let's try to keep it not as political as what was happening last night. So,
Yeah.
Richard.
I want to all invite you to the Sabbath, this Friday evening. I will be there. Is my
Okay.
father's 33rd yard site. He died in
Oh, wow.
1991 at 95.
Wow.
So to me, it's a time of, well, sorrow, but a time of celebration.
Okay.
He came from the old country. He could daven like anybody. Was he religious? No. But boy, could he daven. And he spoke Yiddish fluently and read Yiddish
Huh.
better than Hebrew. I mean, English.
Wow.
He came from the shadows of the Ukraine, Zhytomyr.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think Pam's discussion next week should be rather appropriate since and let's try to keep it, let's not try to keep it very political, but I mean, obviously you do because it's public officials, but
Yeah.
let's keep that in mind.
We're being recorded.
I agree with you. We'll keep it in mind, but who knows?
Anyone else for the good of the order?
Um,
Okay, one other comment before we conclude here with the blessing. We're needing to recruit new people. So, and it doesn't have to be a temple member. So anyone who wants to invite someone to join us for Torah study, if they want to see how we do it, I think would be enlightened by it. I love it. I think it's quite interesting. So, but if you could invite at least one person, we would appreciate grow the numbers.
Okay,
Well,
Steve,
then-
what would be
Last
the
week at
procedure?
Say again?
What would be the procedure to inviting a person? They talk to the
I
rabbi, talk to
would-
you? How do you want to do it?
Have them contact the office. And then they can, either refer them to the website. Or the portion or the link.
The weekly bulletin has it, yeah.
Say again?
The weekly bulletin has the link.
Weekly bulletin also has it. But yeah, I would have them contact the office and then they can give them the information.
Okay,
All
So it
right?
doesn't go to you then.
No.
Maybe it could be announced, really on Friday evening at services, so that everybody in the congregation knows this is going on, and maybe a little description of what it is.
Okay.
I think it has-
I know the rabbi mentions it during his sermons. When, because he always refers to Torah study as to what we discussed, but and I mean, he doesn't do it in a advertising type of way, but
Like,
What I'm seeing is when they do the announcements now, it used to be that different committee people could get up there and make announcements. There seems to be one person making all the announcements.
right,
Is it at
right.
the end of services, I think? And I think we have to make sure we're on that list. And I think maybe pushing the fact that this is a Zoom service. And I know the rabbi isn't loving it, but I know that a lot of us do. So
yeah,
I prefer it personally.
yeah, and making the announcement that it's going to be an easy class for everybody to take, and it's not so much a getting into the depths of religion, but making it a contemporary a relation to the Torah.
Got it.
I have to go. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks,
Mindy.
Minya.
Have a good week.
You too.
I have to go too.
Let's conclude then real quick
Yeah.
together. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Eloheinu melech
Eloheinu
haolam,
Olam,
asher
Asher
nataну
natan
Torah
Torah
emet,
This
v'chayei olam atah b'tokeinu.
Baruch
Baruch atah Adonai,
Adonai,
noteinu Torah.
Torah.
Blessed is
Adonai
Adonai,
our God,
God, ruler of the universe, is given a teaching
us
of
a
truth,
teaching of truth,
planted within us
planted in us
eternal life.
eternal
Eternal
life.
life.
Blessed is
Blessed is
Adonai,
Adonai,
giver of the Torah. Amen. All right, Pam's next week and Marcia's.
See you all next week.
I'm
Yep.
the week
All right,
after.
take care.
Thanks for
Thank
doing
you.
this,
Have a
Steve.
good weekend, everybody. Good
You
week.
too.